Oh, well, this is exciting. Earlier today, we're being told tourists and National Trust rangers saw the legendary Finn disappear into a magical doorway within the rock face here at the Giant's Causeway.
They found it on a Tuesday in October, the way you find most things that change everything. Completely by accident. Workers in County Meath were clearing a mound of earth and loose stone that had been sitting in a farmer's field for as long as anyone could remember. It looked like a hill. It felt like a hill. For centuries, that's all anyone thought it was. Then a laborer's shovel struck something solid, not rock, not root, something smooth, deliberately placed. They moved more soil, then more. And there it was, a stone slab, enormous, set into the base of the mound like a door. They pried it open. What was behind it shouldn't have been there. Not in Ireland. Not in 3200 BC. Not built by people who hadn't yet invented the wheel. The passage stretched 19 meters into the earth. The walls pressed in on both sides. And at the very end, in a chamber no living person had entered in more than 5,000 years, the ceiling was dry. The stone joints were sealed. Perfect. Yet after 52 centuries of Irish rain and cold, the inside of this structure was immaculate. That was 1699, and it was only the beginning. Because in 2022, a team of geophysicists scanned the same mound using technology that can see through solid rock, and found something the original excavators had missed entirely. There are more rooms, hidden ones, sealed behind stone that no one has touched in over 5,000 years, and no one has opened them yet. The mound at Newgrange in County Meath. Now, Ireland sits in the Boyne Valley about 50 kilometers north of Dublin. From the road, it doesn't look like much. A grassy dome, rounded, wide, surrounded by low fieldstone walls and farmland. You could drive past it a dozen times and never stop. Walk up to it though, and the scale changes. The mound is 85 meters across and 12 meters high. It contains over 200,000 tons of earth and stone. 97 massive curbstones ring its base, each weighing several tons, many of them etched with spirals, diamonds, and looping geometric patterns that don't match any known writing system, any known decorative tradition, any culture you were taught about in school. Stand at the entrance. The massive entrance stone lies in front of you, a flat slab almost 3 meters wide, carved across its entire face with a triple spiral, 3 interlocking loops, cut with a precision that modern stonemasons still struggle to replicate. On either side of the doorway, in white quartz stones and rounded river cobbles face the exterior. No quarry for the quartz has ever been found within a practical distance. Nobody knows how it got there. Crouch down and step inside. The passage is narrow, 1.20 meters wide. You can reach out and touch both walls at once. The stone closes in above your head. The light from behind you disappears within a few steps. With the team that began excavating the site in the 1960s described the feeling as profound. Not just archaeological significance, but something else, something older. The air inside had not circulated freely since before the Egyptian pyramids were laid. They had been working the site for 3 years before the most important discovery was made. It happened on the morning of December 21st, 1967. The lead researcher had been at the site since before dawn, alone in the chamber. Yet he had noticed something in the weeks prior. A slit above the entrance, what he called a roof box, barely 34 centimeters wide, too narrow to be a window, too deliberate to be an accident. He had a theory. The winter solstice sun rose at 8:58 that morning. A beam of light entered the roof box, crept down the 19-meter passage, and for exactly 17 minutes, flooded the inner chamber in gold. For the first time in 4,000 years, the interior of Newgrange was lit exactly as its builders had intended. The researchers understood immediately what they were looking at. This wasn't just a tomb. It was an instrument built to capture the precise angle of the sun on the one morning each year when the night is longest. Engineered so that a slit 34 centimeters wide would align with a single point on the horizon. A calculation so exact that the builders must have observed the solstice sunrise from this hill repeatedly. It was for decades before they broke ground. 5,000 years before the telescope, before written mathematics, before the wheel was in use in Ireland. For weeks after the solstice discovery, the team found nothing more surprising than what they already had. Then a soil analysis came back from the far wall of the inner chamber. The results would take years to fully understand. But one thing was clear immediately. The chamber had been opened and resealed multiple times. Someone had been back. But when the researchers extracted the human remains from the inner chamber, the fragments were small, scattered. There wasn't much. A handful of bones from what appeared to be 5 separate individuals mixed into the earth of the floor. For years, these fragments sat in storage at the National Museum of Ireland, catalogued but largely unstudied. Then a genetics team requested access. The results landed in the kind of silence that falls over a room when nobody knows what to say first. You find the bones belonged to a man who should not have existed. His genome was intact enough to sequence. The analysis revealed something almost no genome survey in human prehistory had ever produced at this scale. His parents were first-degree relatives, not distant cousins, not second-degree, first-degree. The kind of biological proximity that, in virtually every human society ever studied, ancient or modern, is universally forbidden. His parents may have been brother and sister. Think about what that means for a moment. You are looking at a 5,000-year-old civilization that built the most sophisticated astronomical monument in Bronze Age Europe. They moved 200,000 tons of stone. They engineered a solar alignment so precise it still works today. And their leadership, or at least one member of it, was born from an incestuous union so extreme it was likely a ritual act, not an accident, not a secret, a deliberate statement of power. Because he wasn't hidden, he was placed in the innermost chamber of the most important monument on the island, in the holiest room of the holiest building in the country. Whatever his parentage meant to the people who buried him there, it was not shameful. It was the reason he was there. The genetics team cross-referenced his genome with bones from other passage tombs across Ireland. Carrowmore, Carrowkeel, Millen Bay, the DNA strands connect. But a web of distant family relations spread across the island, linking high-status burials in at least 4 separate locations. A dynasty. Ruling Ireland from passage tombs spread across the country, bound together by bloodline and possibly by stone. What the genetics team couldn't answer was the question that had been sitting at the edge of this story since the first day of excavation in 1962. Where were the rest of the dead? 5 sets of bone fragments in a monument this size. For a tomb that was actively used for at least 1,000 years. Where did the others go? This is where the story turns strange in a different direction. Among the artifacts recovered from the chamber and its surrounding soil, the excavation team found coins, Roman ones, dating to the 3rd and 4th centuries AD, roughly 1,500 years after Newgrange was built, and crucially from a civilization that never set foot in Ireland. The Romans invaded Britain. They built Hadrian's Wall. No, they stopped there. The legions never crossed the Irish Sea, and yet Roman coins ended up inside Newgrange. The instinct is to explain this away. Trade, travelers, wandering merchants who happened to leave coins at an ancient monument. But the team was careful about context. These weren't surface finds from the surrounding field. Some were found in configurations that suggested deliberate placement, not lost, left. This meant something else entirely. As Newgrange was not abandoned when its builders died, it was not forgotten. 1,500 years after the last stone was set, people were still coming here. Still treating it as sacred ground, still leaving offerings. In Irish mythology, Newgrange is called Brú na Bóin, the mansion of the Boyne. The ancient texts describe it as the home of the Dagda, one of the most powerful figures in the Irish pantheon, a god of earth and abundance. The texts describe the Dagda's son, Angus Og, and eventually claiming the mound as his own dwelling through a legal trick, borrowing it for a day and a night, then arguing that a day and a night constitutes all of time. The Romans who left coins in this chamber apparently knew none of that mythology, but they clearly sensed something. They came anyway. There are other interpretations. Some researchers note that in late Roman Britain, it was not unusual for Roman objects to travel beyond the frontier as diplomatic gifts or trade items. As a Roman coin in a sacred Irish site might represent nothing more unusual than a traveler leaving a token of personal significance at a place that inspired reverence. That's the measured reading. The other reading is simpler and harder to dismiss. Something about this site made people keep coming back across 40 centuries. Something they could feel but not name. In December 2022, an Irish film crew followed a team of geophysicists onto the grounds of Newgrange with equipment that looks, from the outside, like nothing more impressive than a wheeled sensor being rolled slowly across the grass. What it does is listen. Microgravity analysis measures the way the Earth's gravitational field varies over hollow spaces. Ground-penetrating radar bounces signals off buried structures. Together, they can map what lies beneath the surface without breaking the ground. The team was from Slovakia. They had done this kind of survey dozens of times on European prehistoric sites. Yet they had set expectations. They were there to confirm the known, to map the chamber and passage already identified in the 1960s. What they got instead was the biggest archaeological announcement from this site in 50 years. Two anomalies, deep inside the mound, positioned side by side at the rear of the structure past the known chamber. The signal signatures matched hollow spaces, collapsed cavities, possibly rooms, and they were located in direct alignment with the existing passage. Yet the geometry was not accidental. The existing passage runs from the entrance at the front of the mound to the chamber at the center. The two anomalies sit behind the chamber, extending the line toward the rear of the mound, as if the builders started with the front chamber and kept going. At Noth, another passage tomb just a few hundred meters away in the same Boyne Valley complex. There are two passages, one from the east, one from the west, both leading to central chambers. At Douth, the third tomb in the triad, archaeologists have found at least two passages and suspect there are more. The working theory now is that Newgrange is the same, that what was opened in 1699, what was excavated in the 1960s, what has been the basis of everything anyone has ever written about this site is a fragment. One wing of a structure that may be 3 or 4 times more complex than anyone understood. And no one has opened the rear chambers. They remain sealed, under stone, under 200,000 tons of earth waiting. The team that ran the 2022 survey described the result as extraordinary, more than they could have hoped for. The filmmaker behind the documentary called it an incredible result, but there was something careful about the language from the official bodies. Supportive in tone, non-committal on next steps. Because opening those chambers is not simple. The mound is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Any excavation requires years of planning, permits, and consultation. The archaeologists who found this aren't in a position to go in next Tuesday and start breaking stone. What sits behind those sealed walls has not been disturbed in 5,000 years. And somewhere in a storage archive in Dublin, the fragmented DNA of a man born from an incestuous union suggests there may be more of his family waiting inside. Here, the story leaves County Meath and moves west, 200 kilometers across the island, in County Roscommon. There is a site that most visitors to Ireland never hear about, Rathcrogan, the ancient seat of the kings of Connaught. A landscape of 240 separate monuments, burial mounds, earthworks, ring forts, ceremonial enclosures, covering an area that archaeologists describe as one of the most important prehistoric sites in all of Ireland. On a par with Newgrange, largely forgotten by everyone outside the discipline. At the southwestern edge of the complex, though in a field no more remarkable than any other, there is a fissure in the earth, Owainagat, the Cave of Cats. The entrance is a narrow stone-lined passage, low and dark, formed by 2 upright stones and a lintel. You have to crawl in on your hands and knees. The passage drops immediately into a limestone cave system that extends into the hill. The ancient Irish texts, the oldest literary tradition in Northern Europe outside of Greek and Latin, describe this entrance as the literal gateway to the otherworld, the Irish underworld, the realm of the dead and the supernatural. On Samhain, October 31st, it was said that the cave opened, that creatures from the otherworld emerged, that the boundary between worlds dissolved. The Christian church eventually absorbed Samhain as All Hallows Eve, Halloween. You know the rest of that story. Yes, but here's what makes Owainagat different from other gateway to the otherworld sites in Irish mythology. It is marked. At the entrance, carved into the stone lintel in Ogham, the earliest Irish writing system, a series of notches cut along a central line, there is an inscription. Ogham inscriptions from this period are rare. Most of them are straightforward. A name, a lineage, a memorial. So-and-so, son of so-and-so. Territorial markers. Grave notices. This inscription is different. The researchers who translated it found a text that reads less like a marker and more like a label. It identifies the location, specifically, as an entrance. To what? The stone does not say. The inscription ends. The passage continues downward into the dark. Let's take stock of what we actually have. A passage tomb built in 3200 BC by a population that dragged 200,000 tons of stone across 30 miles of Irish countryside before the wheel was in use. Engineers who calculated the precise angle of the winter solstice sunrise and built a 17-minute light show into the architecture of a building they expected to last forever. A ruling dynasty with DNA so inbred it suggests deliberate incestuous ritual and a web of genetic connections to high-status burials across the island. Roman coins left inside a chamber by visitors from a civilization that never invaded Ireland. 2 sealed rooms that no instrument has ever entered is sitting in perfect alignment with the passage that leads to the known chamber. And 20 kilometers away, a cave that the oldest Irish literature describes as an actual door to the underground realm, marked with an Ogham inscription that simply says, "This is the entrance." The mainstream interpretation holds all of this together without strain. Newgrange was a ceremonial complex, a tomb, a calendrical instrument, and a place of persistent sacred significance. Yet the dynasty that controlled it was likely an elite lineage that used both biological exclusivity and astronomical spectacle to consolidate and project power. The Roman coins represent the enduring magnetism of a site that people across cultures recognized as holy. The hidden chambers, if they exist, are likely additional burial spaces of the same type, more of what we already have. And Unopened is a cave whose cultural significance was woven into folklore over millennia. And that is the responsible read. And it is probably correct. But responsible doesn't mean complete, because the question that keeps circling the edges of this story, the one that the DNA data raises and the hidden chambers amplify, is one of scale. Who was this civilization? How large was it? How connected? The isotope data from bone fragments at multiple passage tomb sites suggests individuals had traveled long distances to be buried in them. Not just across Ireland, and in some cases from significantly further. People who had spent formative years in regions with different soil chemistry, different water signatures, showing up in a burial mound in the Boyne Valley. The same web of familial genetics that links the Newgrange elite to tombs in Sligo and Down and coastal Northern Ireland suggests a coordinated network. Not a single village burying its dead, a civilization managing its sacred sites across an entire island. Some researchers have begun referring to Neolithic Ireland not as a collection of isolated communities, but as something more like a distributed ceremonial culture, one where the passage tomb complex wasn't local architecture, but a shared national institution, like a cathedral network, like a capital and its satellites. If that's true, then Newgrange wasn't the burial site of a local chieftain. Yeah, it was something closer to Westminster Abbey, the place where the most important people and the most important civilization on the island were finally laid to rest, and most of its rooms have never been opened. There is another angle that some researchers carefully have raised. The winter solstice alignment at Newgrange is not unique in Ireland. Cairn T at Loughcrew is aligned to the equinox sunrise. Cairn G at Carrowkeel has a roof box similar to Newgrange's, and aligned to the summer solstice sunset. Multiple tombs show astronomical orientations. A few researchers have begun mapping these alignments across the island and asking whether the sight lines between sites are deliberate, whether the passage tombs were positioned not just for local ritual use, but in relationship to each other, whether the whole island was a map. This theory is speculative. The evidence doesn't yet support a firm conclusion, but the evidence doesn't rule it out either. And the hidden chambers at Newgrange sit at the heart of it, because if those rooms are opened, and if they contain what the most optimistic interpretation suggests, additional chambers, additional alignments, additional remains, then what we understand about Neolithic Ireland will need to be rewritten, not updated. Rewritten. In the winter of 1967, a researcher sat alone in the dark inside a 5,000-year-old stone chamber and waited for the sun to rise. He had gone into that chamber every morning for weeks. Other archaeologists thought he was being eccentric. The site had already given them so much: the carvings, the architecture, the remains. There was more than enough to publish, more than enough to fill a career. But he kept coming back to the roof box, that narrow slit above the entrance, too precise to be structural, too deliberate to be decorative. On December 21st, the light came. He would write about the moment later, describing it as one of the most profound experiences of his professional life, not because of what it proved, because of what it meant. 5,000 years before that morning, someone had sat on this same hill, had watched this same sunrise, had understood exactly what it was and what it meant, and had decided, in the absence of metal tools, in the absence of writing, in the absence of everything we consider civilization, to build a machine that would capture it. They wanted it to last. Though they engineered the chamber to stay dry, they sealed the roof box with quartz panels to protect the alignment. They built the corbelled ceiling with such precision that not a drop of water has entered in 52 centuries. They wanted whoever came after to see what they had seen. There is something almost unbearable about the gap. 5,000 years of human history between the people who built this thing and the man sitting in the dark, waiting for their light to come back. Is centuries of forgetting. Centuries of the mound sitting in a field remembered by no one, covered in grass, mistaken for a hill. And then, on a Tuesday morning in December, the light returned exactly as intended, as if no time had passed at all. The hidden chambers complicate this, because if they're real, and the geophysical data strongly suggests they are, then what happened to them? Why was one passage opened and two more sealed? The 1699 discovery found the entrance stone displaced. It moved by the weight of settling earth. The passage was exposed but not excavated. Centuries of unregulated visitors came and went, removing artifacts, disturbing remains. Whatever was in the outer chamber before 1699 was partially gone by the time trained archaeologists arrived in the 1960s. The hidden rooms were never found. They were never opened, which means they were never disturbed. Whatever is inside those chambers has been untouched since the Neolithic period. No looters, and no well-meaning antiquarians, no Victorian collectors, no curious tourists, just stone and dark, and whatever was placed there 5,000 years ago by people who built their most important building so carefully that the ceiling is still dry. There is a list of pending applications at UNESCO to conduct further geophysical surveys. There are conversations among archaeologists about the ethics and practicalities of excavation. There are funding discussions. While there are debates about the preservation implications, once you open a chamber, you can't unopen it. Once that air, undisturbed for 50 centuries, is exposed to the outside world, a clock starts ticking, so the rooms stay sealed. For now. And in Roscommon, the cave at Rathcrogan sits in a field with a handwritten sign and a cattle gate. The inscription at its entrance is partially weathered. The passage descends into the dark. The annual tour group ducks inside with headlamps. He spends 20 minutes in the limestone, emerges blinking into the gray Irish sky. The oldest literature in the northern world called this place a door. Not a metaphor for a door. An actual entrance to an actual place where the dead went and where once a year something came back out. No one has excavated the cave system past its initial chambers. The geophysical survey of the broader Rathcrogan complex mapped surface monuments. The cave itself, its full extent, yet what lies deeper in the limestone, remains unknown. Two sealed doors, both in Ireland, both sitting on top of something no one has yet opened. Here is what we know for certain. Newgrange was built before the pyramids. It has been standing longer than almost any human construction on Earth. The people who built it were more sophisticated than anyone understood until recently. Astronomers, engineers, geneticists of a kind. He's managing a dynasty across an island and leaving behind a solar instrument so precise it still works 5,200 years later. We know there are hidden rooms inside it. We know they are aligned with the existing chamber. We know they have never been opened. We know that a man buried in the innermost room was the child of what may have been a brother-sister union. That Roman visitors, 1,500 years later, still came to leave offerings. Yet that isotopes in the bones of the dead suggest people traveled from distant regions to be buried here. That the genetic web linking the dead at Newgrange to other passage tombs across Ireland points to something larger than a single local monument. We know that in a cave 200 kilometers away, the oldest Irish texts placed the entrance to the underworld, and we know that the stone at that entrance is inscribed with words that say, simply, "This is the way in." What we don't know is what's inside the sealed rooms. We don't know why the chambers were left when the known passage was sealed. We don't know what was deposited there, or by whom or when. We don't know if the astronomical alignments of the passage tombs across Ireland are connected, if the whole island was mapped by a civilization that left no writing except spirals carved into stone. We don't know what the builders of Newgrange called themselves. We don't know the language they spoke. We don't know what they believed about the sun that entered their chamber every winter solstice, or what ceremony they performed in the 17 minutes while it was there. We know they wanted us to see it. They built the machine for someone who would come after. They sealed the ceiling so the water wouldn't get in. They left the roof box precisely aligned. They were thinking about us. Maybe the question isn't what's behind the sealed door. Maybe the question is, were they expecting us to open it, or were they counting on us to wait?